So the webinar is now streaming live. So all of our mics are live. And then we just got to wait for the guest of honor. I know this is probably driving Eileen crazy because she gets a little, even though she does a great job, she gets a little nervous. So I'm sure this is,
Well, we all get a little nervous, Dave.
yeah.
It's just not Eileen.
Yep.
Kathy, are you on there? Are you still on there? I'm looking at,
I'm here.
yeah, the meeting says the meeting in Forest Grove School District Budget Committee, and it says 6 p.m.
Yeah, it's 5:30. I just copied it over from one last year and I missed that. So it's 5:30.
So I'm wondering, if the couple of people that are missing think it's 6 o'clock.
That I think it was just on your.
Oh, it was just on mine? Okay, okay. All right, that's great. Yeah, okay. I texted Pete to see where he is.
Emailed the ones that aren't here, so hopefully we'll get an answer soon.
Okay.
Something exciting happened with the game.
I know. She looks pretty happy.
Sorry, they just hit a really nice ball in center right field, and Violet, our senior right fielder, just made a really great catch.
Oh, good.
And she was very excited about it too.
Yay.
Hi, Sujay. Thanks for coming tonight. We're just waiting right now. We're having a couple of technical difficulties. So we're getting those fixed up. So we're just fine. We haven't started yet.
Okay, I can hear you guys now. Sorry about that.
Oh, that's fine.
I think where we're at now, we've got Eileen, we've got 3 of the 5. We've got our board members that are here tonight. So maybe we call this thing to order and get it going.
Okay, thanks, Dave. I will call the meeting of the Forest Grove School District Budget Committee meeting to order on March 28th, 2022 at 5:37. Persons having questions about or requests for special needs and accommodations should contact the superintendent's office. At this time, I'm going to call the meeting to order and do a roll call. Melinda? Is Melinda here? I didn't see. Yes? Okay. Deborah, is Deborah here? Okay.
No,
Okay. Sujay?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, great. Nicholas? I saw Nicholas. Stephanie Rose? Is Stephanie here?
no,
No, okay. Pete Bauer? I
no.
didn't. All right, I'm here. Narcy is not here. Mark's not here. Brad
Here.
and Val.
Here.
Okay. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Introductions. I guess the introductions for the cabinet would be
Yeah,
what we need.
Dave Parker, superintendent, since we have new folks.
John O'Neill, Assistant Superintendent.
David Warner, Communications.
Kim Scherer, Director of Student Services.
Eileen Clute, business.
Is that everybody? Okay, great. The next item on the agenda is the approval of the March 28, 22 agenda. Okay, so do I have a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
So moved.
So moved. I'll second it.
I'll second it.
Okay. Any discussion? All right, I will do a roll call vote. Melinda? Are you there, Melinda? I don't, no, is Melinda not?
Melinda, you're muted.
There you go.
You're muted.
Sorry.
There you go.
I
Okay,
approve.
good, thank you. Deb, did I see that Deb's not here tonight? Okay, Deb's not here. Sue J,
Here.
do you approve the agenda as presented?
Yes.
Yes, or, okay, yeah, okay, good. Nicholas,
Yes.
thank you. I'm a yes. Brad
Yes.
and Val.
Yes.
All right. The next piece on our agenda tonight is to elect a budget committee chair. Do I have a nomination for a budget committee chair? Well, Brad, you want to make a nomination for us tonight?
I nominate you, Kate.
No, I'm already, I can't do it. I'm, thank you.
I nominate Melinda.
Okay,
If
do I
she's
have a
willing.
second? Yeah, if you're willing. Melinda, are you willing?
Sure.
Okay, do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay. I will do a roll vote here. Val,
Yes. And thanks,
Brad?
Melinda.
Yes.
I'm a yes. Nicholas,
Yes.
Sue J,
Yes.
okay. And Melinda,
Yes.
you can vote for yourself. Okay.
Oh, good.
And Kate, Peter's
Yeah.
joined the meeting now too.
Who?
Peter.
Hello.
Oh, okay, Pete, we're doing a, you can be in on the next election for the vice chair.
Okay.
Does Melinda take over or do I do that also?
Melinda can take over and open the nominations for vice chair.
Okay, all right, Melinda, you go ahead.
Okay. Now taking nominations for vice chair for the budget committee.
I'll nominate Nicholas. If he's willing.
Since most of our folks here are new, maybe we could just give them a quick summary of what the vice chair does.
Yes.
The vice chair runs the meeting if the chair is not available. And it's just pretty much just running the agenda that is presented that our board secretary will send out to us.
And if you need any help, we're happy to meet with you and talk through any other pieces. It's not a tough job at all.
No, and you can ask questions anytime during the meeting.
Sounds good.
Okay. Thank you, Nicholas.
You're welcome.
Any other nominations? Do I ask for discussion or anything? No?
You It's okay.
Yeah, you can.
Okay. Any discussion? All right. So someone was nominated. Do they have to be seconded as well?
Yes.
Okay.
I'll,
Does
I'll
anyone?
second it.
Okay, great. So we have Nicholas for vice chair. Are we going to go ahead and take a vote now?
Yes.
Yes.
I think I scratched down the names of who's here. I'll just do a roll call. Val,
Yes.
Kate,
Yes.
Brad,
Yes.
Nicholas,
Yes.
Sujay,
Yes.
Melinda is a yes, and Peter,
I'm here. Thanks.
and that's a yes for Peter.
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, Nicholas is now the vice chair. All right, next on the agenda is Budget 101 with Eileen Flute.
Thank you, Melinda. I am going to share my screen. All right. It's not working. Okay, so tonight we have Budget 101, and then we have some budget building blocks, building some historical background on how we've received our revenue in the past, how we have spent that revenue in the past, and how we compare to other districts. And then we'll close up with just kind of an update on where we are with this year's budget and cash flow as compared to what we had projected it to be when we adopted the budget last year. So we'll go over those three things tonight and hopefully get through this. So Budget 101, the Oregon local budget law requires districts and any local public agency to go through a budget process, ensure that it's public. It sets guidelines around how the budget itself is prepared, how it's laid out, and how it's presented. And so there are some areas of the budget document itself that's customized to Forest Grove, but some of it is required by Oregon law. It requires our budget committee to consist of equal members of school board members and community members. So we have a 5-member school board. And so we have 5 additional community members appointed by the board. So all 10 represent the budget committee as a whole. The local budget law requires and encourages opportunities for community to participate in this process. Participating in the budget process can be included in being a member of this committee, being a member and serving on the budget committee, the budget committee holding public comment at their budget meetings, and then through the board hearing in June. And then any other ways that we get community to participate, whether it's a survey or information or asking questions of our admin team and their staff. So there's several ways that we try to do outreach for our community to be able to provide input into the budget process. But the required pieces are the public comment, the board hearing, and the budget committee itself. The budget itself provides justification for the district to impose local property taxes in the community. And then it also sets and controls spending of public funds. So it sets that maximum spending limit for our budget and our spending for the upcoming year. Our budget document, it's a plan. It is estimates of what we anticipate to happen over the upcoming year. We do a budget every fiscal year, and our fiscal year starts July 1 through June 30th of each year. So right now we are working on the July 1, 2022 through June 30th, 2023 budget. Again, it's estimates of our resources and expenditures based on what we know now. The budget is then, again, that it sets the basis for our appropriations. It creates that max spending limit to spend public money. This is just kind of a brief calendar of the requirements of the budget committee and the public meetings that we have. So tonight is March 28th, then April 25th. These are our preliminary budget meetings. So where we're trying to build that background information for you as a budget committee, kind of going over historical information, financial updates. And then on May 12th is the first actual official budget meeting. And that's where Superintendent Parker will deliver the budget message and will deliver the budget proposal to you as a budget committee. Once that happens, you'll have 2 budget meetings at least, May 19th and May 26th are budget meetings that you'll have to be able to just kind of dive deeper into the budget, ask questions, dissect the budget, ask for more information, but ultimately approve a budget and recommend a budget to the school board for adoption. The board will then adopt the budget on June 13th. And the state requirement is that the budget has to be adopted by June 30th of each year for us to spend any money on July 1st. So this process has to be done by June 30th. And then lastly, we have to have the information to the county tax assessor to certify the budget to be able to collect that property taxes by July 8th. At the same time, we have our internal budget process. The development of the budget process is really January through April. January and February, we're really working on enrollment projections, staffing projections, just kind of building some of that background to the budget. And then in March, we work with all of our administrators, our department leads, and try to build the specific details around the budget. In April, we work primarily on balancing the budget. And then in May is preparing the document and proposing it to the budget committee itself. So that's kind of that process. It's a 6-month process, starting all the way back in January and ends in June. Budgeting and governance, we have 3 different kind of groups of people working through the budget process. We have our administration. Administration is primarily served with gathering all the information and proposing a budget to the budget committee. Once that is proposed to the budget committee, it is really in your hands and then the board's hands to approve a budget and recommend it to the board. At that time, we primarily stand back and serve as an advisory capacity. So we'll help answer questions, gather information for you. But once the proposed budget is presented, that's our best working document for the budget next year. Then it goes to the budget committee. The board sets the district goals and policies, and then the budget is supposed to reflect those goals and policies. So the budget committee is really looking at the board's budget, or the board's and the district goals and policies, and kind of discussing it and reviewing it, and then approving a budget to the board for adoption. Roles and responsibilities of the budget committee. The budget committee is charged with receiving the budget, listening to the budget and the explanation behind the budget. What are major changes? What are major assumptions behind the budget? Listening to the public, hearing public comment, dissecting the budget and discussing the budget, testing it against district goals, and then ultimately approving a budget to the budget, to the board. Excuse me. A quick, gentle reminder of what is not the budget committee's role. The budget committee doesn't set staffing salaries and benefit levels. This is done primarily through union negotiations, which is then approved by the board after negotiations. The budget committee doesn't place specific staff or discuss individual employees. That is for administration to determine the best way, best avenue of making everything work. Major programs, so adding or deleting major programs, that's primarily a board decision. And then developing policies, which is a board decision. So just a reminder of through the budget process, the responsibilities and where those are. The budget process itself, all meetings are subject to public meetings law. So all of them are open to the public to attend and join. And then we have quorum is required. So you have to have a majority to conduct business, which is 6 members have to be in attendance and 6 members have to vote yes for anything to pass through, regardless of how many are actually attending that day. The budget committee can ask for additional information, ask questions, dissect the budget. Again, majority vote is required to take any action. The budget becomes a public document as soon as it's released to the budget committee. It is an internal working document up until that point. And then once Superintendent Parker delivers the budget message and we hand the budget document to you as the budget committee, then it becomes a public document and open to anybody in the community. You are required to take public comment at 1 or more meetings. And then again, you must approve a budget by June 30th. This is kind of a view of what the outcome of last year's budget is. So budget approval is setting the maximum appropriation for the district to spend public money. And so what this is it's by major fund and then major function. So we have our general fund, our special revenue funds, our food service funds, our debt service funds, our capital projects, community enterprise, internal service, and trust agency. So we are setting the maximum appropriation that could be spent on instruction in general fund or support services in general fund. And the same for special revenue or community enterprise. So this is really that end result of this process. I wanted to put this in here for your reference for future. It's when going through the budget document, you'll be looking at our accounting structure, and it goes into detail by major fund, function, and object and what that means. And so our accounting structure is required by Oregon law. All school districts in the state have the same structure, but really it goes by major fund, then major function, and object. So we could be talking about general fund, support services, and then salaries and benefits or supplies. So it's really trying to dial down into what you're spending your funds on. So major fund, major function, major object is what you'll see mostly going through this. Once you as a budget committee have had an opportunity to receive the budget, go through the process, listen to community, dissect the budget, you'll have 4 options. The first one is approve the budget as it's proposed to you. You can increase an appropriation amount if you think we'll get more money. So if you think the state school fund is projected less than it should be and we're going to get more revenue for it, we can increase appropriation and then increase expenditure to offset that. Or if you think the budget has too much appropriation in there, we can decrease the appropriation amount if you think our resources are over projected. Or lastly, you can move amounts between major functions. And so that's that instruction versus support services or those different major function areas. Okay. Before I go on to the rest, does anybody have any questions on the budget committee's role or responsibilities? Okay. This next section just kind of goes over how we budget. We really look at, first off, identifying our resources that are available. What do we have in our operating resources coming through? What's our state school fund, enrollment driven coming in, funds coming in, property taxes, any of those major operating resources. Then we look at our special revenue grants. So any funds that we receive for a specific purpose, like our title or our IDA or Measure 98, SSA. So all of those special revenue grants that we receive for a specific purpose. And then the last couple is our capital improvements, debt requirements, and other resources. So just looking at all of those different buckets and areas of resources that we have coming in each year. So we look at all of those. And then we look at the spending that's associated to those different revenue sources. With our operating, we look at what our current service level is. Current service level is not taking these 10 FTE and moving them forward to next year. It's looking at our enrollment projections and average class size going into next year. So current service level, if we want to maintain an average class size of 23 or 24 to 1, what is the staffing needs required to maintain that service level, rather than just looking at what bodies we have. And then we look at what district level or operational needs and FTE there is. So looking at what that service level needs are, then we evaluate the spending. We look at what we're currently spending. Do we need to make any changes going into next year? Identify things that are no longer needed, ensure that contracts are being met, update our bargained amounts, and then evaluate what our priorities are moving into the next year, our different community feedback, our strategic plan. What are those priorities that we need to ensure are being built into next year's budget? And then lastly, when you look at both your revenue and your expenditures, you have to identify what your fund balance is, and we have to have a balanced budget. So our fund balance is what the financial need is to be able to start the new year and have, Okay. Just a different look of our expenditures. This is a view of the different components of our general fund. And our general fund is based on two different budgeting methods. Our schools are all enrollment based. So the staffing is all based on a per student ratio. And then the discretionary budgets for the buildings are all, again, based on a per student ratio. So it's a per student allocation to each building for their budget needs for next year. And then the programs and departments are all essentially zero base. We look at what our known expenditures are going to be, and we build those budgets from the ground up. So we know exactly how much things are going to cost and what the needs are from the ground up. Then we look at both of these and what staffing needs are for those, and we apply the staffing costs. And most of it's all union bargained amounts. So we ensure that there's step and column movement in there. Cost of living is included. We're doing all of our professional development. Our working conditions are all met. Benefits and health insurance is all in there. Leaves are accounted for. And then finally the sub and temp time. So we're looking at what is that requirement needed to be able to meet those staffing needs for both the schools and the departments. And then once we look at that, we have to balance the budget. So it's never going to be exactly, here's all your resources and here's exactly your expenditures. We're going to have to look at, identify what all of the needs are and the resources and balance a budget. resources must equal our expenditures at the end. So a few resources for you as a budget committee. I'll put these all, it's a lot of reading materials. So if you want to find something to make you go to sleep one night, there's a lot of information here. But it's all here if you have questions, and I'm more than happy to answer any questions for you as a budget committee member. But I'll make sure this is all in an email for you, so you have these links and resources too. Before we go on to some history and some background information on how we receive our money and how we spend our funds, do you guys have any questions on the budget process as a whole? Okay. All right, so we'll go through primarily focus on the general fund because that's what we have the most control over on resources, and that's the biggest part of our revenue source. And then we'll talk a little bit about some demographic information and some district comparables. Looking at 2020, 2021 resources, this is our last fiscal year that's been finalized. We had $103.8 million in resources, excluding the beginning fund balance coming forward, of which 68% of that was general fund resources. Then we have our restricted grants at 12.9%, our nutrition services, our debt services, our capital, and our Viking House agricultural programs. So you can see most of our resources that we receive are in the general fund, and that's our operating. The other ones are all funds that we receive that are set aside for a specific purpose. Looking specifically at the general fund piece of that, we had $71 million in total resources last year. Most of it is from the state school fund. Then we have our state timber, our common school fund, our county school fund, and our property taxes. All of this, 96% of our total budget is part of the state school fund formula revenue. And so the state takes into consideration the funding for the state school fund piece, how much other local revenue you get. So districts that have high property taxes as a resource would get a little less in the state school fund, and districts that get more property taxes, less state school fund, less property taxes, more state school fund. So it's an equalization formula that tries to not penalize districts in the state based on their community and their demographics. So you wouldn't have, I'm thinking like a Lake Oswego and a Gaston. So Lake Oswego is a much richer district, and so their property taxes are going to be a much higher percentage of their total resources than like a Gaston. They would have a little bit less on the property taxes and more on the state school fund. And so that's that kind of equalization formula that the state does. The only thing that is not part of that is this other resources, the 3.8%. And that's really going to be our indirect rates, E-rate funds, building rentals, student fees, interest revenue. All of that miscellaneous revenue is part of that other bucket. A little bit. Yeah.
Quick question for you. Going back to your last slide there. So the property tax piece, that only comes from properties that are in, the Forest Grove School District proper. Is that correct?
Right. So it's our Forest Grove School District communities. And so if that house is within our boundary, then it would be part of this property tax. So we include all of Forest Grove, the Dilley area, the Gills Creek area, most of Cornelia's. And so all of those communities, as long as the house resides in our district.
Okay. And then the state school fund, is that mostly funded by income tax that gets paid to the state? Do you know, or So I'm just curious.
There's several different funding that goes into that. I have a couple of resources I could pull for you and send to the committee as a whole, just to kind of give you a picture of where that revenue comes from. That work?
Cool. Yeah, just curious.
Okay.
I think the interesting question there is that the state basically decides that if we had two identical districts and they both decided that we were to get $71 million as the total, but one had a big property tax, they would just make up a different, I mean, they make up the state school fund amount so that it adds up to 71. So having more property taxes doesn't mean that you're going to get more eventual funding. And that's always confused. I mean, as I came into education, that was what was confusing about that equalization formula. So I appreciate Eileen kind of going through that.
Okay. So to dive a little deeper into that equalization formula with ODE, Oregon Department of Education, they look at when distributing the state school fund, they're looking at many different things, and they're looking at all of these things with all of the districts in the state. And we are, and then balancing it as a state as a whole and then distributing. So enrollment and student demographics within that enrollment, our local revenue, as talked about in the last slide, transportation costs for districts, our teacher experience rate, floor funding, which is a hold harmless formula. Floor funding, what it does is it helps districts bridge the gap in declining years of enrollment. So you would get the greater of the current year or the prior year's enrollment. So if we were in a declining enrollment, we would have like a 1-year gap. So we'd be getting funded based on last year's enrollment for this year. And so it would give us time to kind of accommodate and bridge that gap on declining enrollment. But then at the same time, if you're in increasing enrollment, then you get funded on the higher of. So you get funded on the increase so that you can support the students as they're coming. So it's that floor funding, hold harmless formula is what we call it. And then again, it's looking at how we compare as the state as a whole when the state reconciles. So if we are in declining enrollment, it might not necessarily mean that we are getting a reduction. It's going to be how much is our declining enrollment as compared to the state as a whole. So if the state as a whole is not declining and we are, then we'll be adjusted. But if the state as a whole is declining the same as us, we might not see an impact as much as that. So it's really, we can kind of judge and do the best guess of what us as a district is doing. But then there's that piece of how is the state as a whole being impacted on these different things. Excuse me. I talked on the last slide about the state funding us based on students in our district and the demographics of our students. And so what they do is they apply a weighting to all of our students, and we get a 1 weight for every student in our enrollment in our district. Then we get an additional weight for students on an IEP. Then we get an additional half a weight for English as a second language students, 1.0 for pregnant and parenting, a quarter weight for poverty, and a quarter weight for foster. And so all of those added up combined is our weighted average daily membership. So that's what we get funded from the state on. A little history of that same information for Forest Grove School District. This shows like the last 10 years of our enrollment. We've been pretty much from 5,600 students up to around 6,100 students over the last 10 years. We haven't had a significant, the only significant shift that we really had was here when COVID started and we lost a lot of students. We have about 13% students on IEP. we have about 9% of students as English as a second language. And then we have about 3% poverty rates for students in our community. And so you can just kind of see how that's changed over time. The big one is our poverty that has considerably dropped over the last 10 years. Sorry. Expenditures. We had last year $67.5 million in spend in our general fund alone, of which about 83% of that is in salaries and benefits by themselves. So most of our budget is labor costs, it's staffing. Then we have the second bucket here is the contracts. So that's our transportation, our custodial, and our grounds, which is all contracted services. And then we have our charter school payments, our utilities, and then everything else is that 6.8%. So that's our supplies and materials, our computer technology, facilities, maintenance, everything else, insurance is in that 6.8%. So you can see it like primary, most of our budget is between these top items. Looking at it, the same spend, but by function rather than by object. This shows our historical last 4 years of actual and then last year's actual. But we typically trend about 65% of our budget on instruction and 35% of our budget on support services. Last year, we did see a bump up on instruction, up to 66%. And that's because of the COVID closures. We had a lot of costs in our support services that weren't necessary. So we didn't have transportation, our utilities were down a little. There was a little shift last year on that, but typically we would see about a 65% to 35% split. And then to go in and compare a little bit about how we compare ourselves financially to other districts that are similar size to us. We look at districts that are between 4,000 and 7,000 weights, students in their population. We also look at districts that have between a 10 and a 20% ESL counts, and then between 10 and 13% poverty. And so what it does, we're never going to find a district that like aligns right with us at 5,800 students, 17% ESL and 11% poverty. We won't find every district in the state is different. And so trying to pick district comparables that are the most like us, this is what we kind of narrowed down on trying to identify what those districts are. And so here, Forest Grove School District is about 5,700 weights. And so we chose districts that were close to us. And then we have 3 of those districts meet that guideline with the ESL, and then 3 of the districts meet with poverty. But you can see that they don't all, we're all different. And so trying to see one-on-one is going to be challenging. But these are going to be our most closest comparable districts when we're looking at our student demographics. A couple of them are close to us in also, locally or close to the Portland metro area, like Centennial, Canby, McVinnville, and Corvallis, whereas Hermiston and Redmond they're outliers. They're pretty far away from the Portland metro area, but to have them in here as comparables, it's a couple other data points that we can look at. This shows by function. So instruction is up here and support services is down here. We had last year that 66%, 33% split, and the average is the flat line. But you can see we were above average for the instruction spend and below average for the support services spend. And even if this was dropped down to 65%, we would still be in line with McVinville for last year on that distribution between instruction and support services. This is the same information, just in a lot more detail. I have it in here so you can look at later, but I just wanted to make sure it's in here, and you can see it's broken down into more detail of just a lot broader buckets. So you can have that for later. And then I just wanted to show kind of a year-over-year comparison of us as the district, as Forest Grove, and how that's changed. And so the big change is this, the big change is this transportation line, where the prior year we spent almost 5% of our general fund budget on transportation. And then last year we only spent 2.8% of our budget on transportation. So that was the biggest shift that we had from pre-COVID to COVID on that spend. And then the other way we look at our comparables to our other districts is by object. Labor and benefits combined is the blue line. The yellow is the average line. And then everything except for labor and benefits is down here. And so you can see we're right at average for what we spend our budget on for labor and benefits as compared to our comparables. But again, no district is the same. So comparing against object is a little harder to do because districts contract out services, some don't. We contract out our transportation, our custodial, whereas other districts have those in-house. So that would shift it from the services to the labor and benefits, or some districts contract out sub-services where we have ours in labor and benefits. So this is a harder one to compare against, but it does give us kind of a viewpoint of what other districts do. This is our ending fund balance comparison. So we looked at expenditures and now our ending fund balance as compared to other districts. The blue bar is their total expenditures over the course of the year. So you can see in millions on what their spend was, and then what the percentage of fund balance was for last year. We ended at 20% fund balance last year, and that was primarily because of the COVID pandemic. It was all because of the COVID pandemic, just the closures, the reduced spending, the transportation, like just everything that we did not have to do during the pandemic. Plus, we had the increase of federal funds to be able to help support us with those pandemic-related costs. So we did have a higher fund balance last year, which you'll see later rolling into our beginning fund balance in this year's cash flow. A little history on how we budget our ending fund balance. I wanted to go back and kind of give you guys a view of our goal is to budget an 8 to 10% ending fund balance. The board policy is an 8%. Historically, you can see we budget right there around the 8 to 10%, depending on what's happening with the state school fund and ODE that year. And then what we do is we spend conservatively. We end with a higher fund balance. We budget it down. We end with a higher. We budget it down. We end with a higher. And so we typically end right there around 14 to 15% ending fund balance pre-COVID. And then with the COVID savings, we ended higher. And this is a percentage of resources, where the last one was a percentage of expenditures. So it's just a different way of looking at it. Any questions on this stuff before I move on? I know it's a lot.
I have a question, Eileen. We're talking about the weight, and the weight is determined by the state, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if would there any possibility that these weights would be different in a year or 2 years or 5 years or 10 years? Or how do they determine how much you get every year?
Great question. So the state of Oregon allocates to schools a biennial budget. And so this year, this biennial budget was $63 million. It's $63 billion, right? Saying that right? And then the state gets, the ODE, Oregon Department of Education, gets the state school fund allocation. And then they split that between 2 different years. And it's typically a 49% split between year 1 and 51% split in year 2. And then the state takes that resources and divides it out to the districts based on our demographics and all of those different components that I had on that prior slide. So the state of Oregon gives ODE a biennial budget, and then ODE distributes that out to school districts. Does that make sense?
Okay, so
Sorry.
that changes every 2 years then.
Yes.
Okay,
And this year that we're in right now is year 1 of the biennium. And so the budget that we're doing for next year is the 2nd year of the biennium. So it's known. We have a known state school fund going into next year. In some years, we'll start the year and we'll go through the budget process and we don't have a final state number from ODE. And we might not have it until the end of June before we know what that allocation is. So we're really doing a budget based on our best guess of what ODE in the state of Oregon is going to allocate out to schools. But this year we're in that 2nd year, so it's known and it's going to be a lot easier of a budget process.
okay.
Yeah, Eileen, I have a couple of interesting sort of observations, mostly because I'm a geographer by training. So I tend to think geographically about all these things. And I know all these communities that we've been compared to, and it's very interesting to see that the differences in population for like a place like Canby, versus Forest Grove that, have a different population, yet the student population seems to be very similar. In the comparison. Same with Corvallis. I actually grew up in that town, and it's a much larger area as far as population, but we also have a very similar student base there. I'm also looking around in the town and seeing a lot of different development in Cornelius and in Forest Grove as well. And I'm sure you guys are already thinking in the future, but I love crystal ball geography questions, and what do you guys see, I guess, as far as growth in the community and the number of students that may be coming in as a result of some of this additional development?
That's a good question. We do have Portland State University does a demographic study for us every couple of years. And so what they do is they really try to look at all of the developments, the planned developments, and project what, and just the, people moving in and out of our community. And then they project out what that enrollment projections are by school, by grade for us for 10 years out. And they'll give us a medium, a low, and a high projection. But we just finalized, I'm working on the final draft of the new one. And the new developments really aren't giving us the enrollment. The enrollment coming in isn't as great as the enrollment exiting our system. And so these newer housing developments, a lot of them don't have kids, or they have 1 kid instead of 3 kids, or, so we're seeing a shift where we're seeing a little growth, but not as much as we would have anticipated with some of these newer developments.
Huh. And is that comparing sort of like, forget COVID because that's kind of thrown everything out the window, but are those numbers of potentially declining enrollment, sort of jiving with, I guess, pre-COVID numbers? Just curious.
We did see a significant drop with COVID. And looking at our demographic study pre-COVID to our demographic study now, we have, there is definitely a shift downward in enrollment for our district particularly, and a lot of districts in the state. We're seeing that trend where the growth isn't as great as we thought it would be. Yeah.
Interesting. I guess I find that surprising, partly because Forest Grove is a more affordable area to live in, versus the rest of the metro. And I guess I would think that would attract more folks with families to our area, but
Yeah.
interesting. Thanks.
Okay. Any other questions before I move on to the financial update? All right. So tonight, I just wanted to do a quick overview for those that were on our budget committee last year and an update for those that weren't. This current budget was based on a $9.3 billion state school fund. It was split 49-51 between the 2 years of the biennium. The legislature closed in June after we had already adopted a budget. And the good thing was that what closed with the legislator was in line with what we had built into the budget. So our budget was built on this 9.3, 49-51 split. This current year, our goal was to maintain class sizes, maintain all of our operational and instructional models and programs, and then provide a sufficient ending fund balance because of the uncertainties because of the COVID pandemic. So not knowing what was happening and what was going to start happening and what our needs were going to be in the upcoming year. And then for our grants, we did budget full state allocations for both Measure 98, Student Success Act funds, and then federal stimulus monies, the ESSER 1, 2, and 3 coming in. So just a quick overview of what kind of was some background of this current year's budget. And then this format is kind of a typical format that you will be seeing through the budget process with me and cash flow updates and budget updates. This has historical years, our current year's budget, the forecast, actual, remaining, and then the total year combined, and then how it compares to the adopted budget. This slide particularly is just the resources side. And we have $588,000 more in local resources. Those are primarily from increased property tax collections. The collection rate in our county is it's a little higher than what it's typically been. And then we have, what else was in there? E-rate. Indirect rate charge. So our summer grants that we had, we are able to charge indirect rate, which then becomes revenue to the general fund. State resources, $617,000 more than the adopted budget. And that's primarily because of a statewide reduction in enrollment. So when you have one pot of money and you reduce the number of weights it's being spread across, then that per weight amount goes up for us. And so we got more state resources. A side note on that one, we did get an update on the state school fund. I looked at it this morning and this 617 will be going up from here. So you'll see that on the next cash flow that I'll present the next meeting. But it was pretty significant. The state changed and we lost, I think it was like 10,000 weights across the state between November and now, based on what districts were projecting versus what they're actually seeing in. So that's going to change the state school fund allocation. But I'll talk more about that at the next meeting. And then the last one here is the $1.1 million beginning fund balance. A few slides ago, I talked about the savings from our ending fund balance last year being higher at that 20%. This is where you'll see that coming in as our beginning fund balance from last year. And then same format, expenditures. I have the notes on the next slide, but primarily I wanted to show we are about $3.7 million less in our spending this year than what we had built in the adopted budget. And most all of it is going to be in salaries and benefits. This year, our labor and salaries and benefits savings combined is about $3.1 million. what we're seeing is a shift kind of in the workforce this year. There's several things happening because of COVID, and trying to dive down into kind of what's causing some of these labor savings. These are the different things that I was able to find. We have retirees going out with new hires coming in, where retirees and people higher up on the salary schedule are exiting, and new younger staff with less experience are coming in. And so you have that gap of what you were paying for salaries versus what you are paying now. We have leave of absences that have happened this year, where we have somebody out on leave and we have somebody coming in filling that spot, which then costs less. We have several hard to fill positions that remained open. So as somebody exited, we couldn't fill it, or have remained open this whole year. We have several of those that just cannot fill those positions. So they're open, creating that labor savings. I went in and looked at our hourly rate, the average hourly rate for our licensed staff from what was this time last year versus this time this year, and it's dropped by 2%. So if you consider that 2% for licensed across the whole salary base, that's pretty significant. And 3.7% for our classified. To follow up with that, just kind of some more information for you. We've, in talking with HR, they've processed over 200 new hires to date. That is huge. Between the turnover, the new funds with ESSER, the SIA hires. So all of that new stuff that's happening this year, plus then, you know, the COVID and just the labor shortages across the board. We've had, this was pre-spring break, but we had 47 licensed resignations up to spring break, whereas the last year as a whole, like for the entire year, there was only 27. And then classified, there was 64 resignations, whereas through up to spring break, and then the prior year as a whole was only 19. So you can see how that turnover has really impacted the district. Again, with this shift with retirements or people that are more experienced, been with the district for a long time, exiting, we have another shift of going from PERS to OPSERP. So the retirement costs are a little less. Then the last three things that I have on here is just that continued sub shortage that we've had all year. I think they're filling positions as fast as they can with subs, and there's a lot that remained open. And we heard about that pretty loud in January and February is the big COVID kind of peak hit. And so that sub shortage where we had people out on leaves and we couldn't hire subs, we were just trying to fill and do the best we could during that time. And then professional development, we've reduced a lot of the professional development to give time back to teachers and staff so that we haven't paid and done a lot of professional development during this pandemic. And then the last one here is the delay in the implementation of the Oregon Paid Family Medical Leave. That was supposed to start it was supposed to start this winter, and then they pushed it to start next winter. So we'll budget for it again next year, but that created savings for us. So overall, it's a lot of labor and benefit savings, but just to kind of give you guys some insight on what we're seeing and why we're seeing that that drop in labor costs.
So that saving will be rolled over to the next year, or will be just gone?
The savings will become our ending fund balance for this year, which will then be revenue resources for our beginning fund balance for next year. So then we'll build that into our budget.
Nobody will take it away. That's what I'm saying. Okay.
No. We then get to work with it a little bit for next year. It'll definitely make things a little easier going into the next biennium for us.
Okay.
Okay. fund balance, when we consider the resources and expenditures that I talked about, it gives us a $13 million ending fund balance, which is about 18%. So it's still a little bit lower than where we ended last year. But with the new state school fund estimate that came out that I looked at this morning, I see this popping up and we'll probably end closer to where we ended last year. The last thing I have for y'all tonight is just kind of reminder of things that are happening right now. We are monitoring and looking forward to state school fund updates. This is the time of year that we're working with 3 fiscal years. And so ODE is reconciling and closing out last year. At the same time, reconciling and updating this year's state school fund estimates and giving us projections for next year. So over the next month, we'll start to see more estimates coming out and updates happening with the state, and we'll start to be able to monitor and adjust our cash flow this year and our budget for next year based on those as they come. We do want the longer term impact that I wanted to just note is the state school fund and the new biennium. What's happened this year is that we have ODE funded us at a certain level, our $9.3 billion, and it was supposed to be a certain dollar amount per students that was distributed. And with the loss in enrollment that's come this year, ODE and the state didn't decrease the enrollment. It just increased that per weight dollar amount that we are receiving. And so the challenge for the new biennium and the thing that we're kind of monitoring and looking at is what's going to happen long-term with the state funding. Is the state going to adjust it and reduce the state allocation because we've lost all of this enrollment? And then if that happens, are the enrollment going to come back? And so there's just a lot happening with that. And we'll have the next year to kind of look at it and kind of figure out what the conversations are going to be. But that's something that we have on our radar, is kind of what that next biennium is going to look like. And then specifically to us for enrollment, how is that going to impact, that change going to happen? Because we lost a lot of weights over the last 2 years of COVID. And so our students going to gradually start returning from homeschool, online charter, or are they just going to continue with that through the rest of their education? So where and when are those students going to come back is going to be a challenge for us. That is all I had tonight. So I just wanted to say, if you guys have any questions or you want to go over this individually, I'm more than happy to meet with each one of you guys. I know it's a lot of information through the budget process that we kind of throw at you. So definitely don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions.
Okie doke. If that is all, is there anything else anybody needs to bring up tonight before we adjourn? Nothing? Okay, great. Then I will adjourn the budget committee meeting, and we will see you on April 25th.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thanks.
Have a good evening. Bye-bye.
Bye.
So do I start the next meeting now?
Yeah.
Okay, no pause. No, nobody needs a 2-minute break. Are we good? Are we good?
I'm good.
All right. We're good. Okay. All right. I will call the Forest Grove School Board meeting to order at 6:43 p.m. Roll call. Val?
Here.
Brad?
I'm here.
I'm here, and Sonia?
Here.
Mark is not available tonight, and Narcy's not available tonight. The school board will hear public comments for unscheduled public appearances received through the designated form on the district website. Patrons who wanted to comment live via Zoom should have already registered as a participant, completed the form to provide their information, and indicated they were going to provide a live comment. At this time, we do not have any live comments or emails from the community. So I will ask people to please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And do I need to do introductions, or are we good because we already did them?
You could do it again because we have a couple people that have joined us that are going to do a presentation tonight.
Okay, thanks, Kathy. Okay, go ahead.
John O'Neill, Assistant Superintendent.
Kevin Noreen, Director of Human Resources.
Kim Scherer, Director of Student Services.
David Warner, Communications.
Eileen Clute, Business.
Is there anybody
Peter
else?
Pinion, Technology Department.
Okay.
Osvaldo Garcia, Coordinator of Equity, ELL and Migrant Education.
Laura Mannon, ELD coach.
Joel Rickard, ELD instructional coach.
Here we go, Kate.
Okay, I think we're good then. Do I have a motion to approve the tonight's agenda as presented?
So moved.
Second. Discussion? All those in favor? Brad,
Yes.
Val,
Yes.
Sonia,
Yes.
and I'm a yes also. Correspondence and celebrations.
I'll hit it in my superintendent report.
Okay. Sonia, student representation report. Go ahead.
Okay, so there's not that much to report on since spring break happened, but we did have a spirit week the week before spring break, which went pretty well. We also have Mamma Mia, which is opening on Friday night, and I think they have like 7 to 8 shows. So if you want to stop by and watch one, I think they would really love that, you know. And then again, we have prom on the 23rd, and there are also some students figuring out how to plant some new, like, I forgot the specific type of plant, but just like more trees and like small things in front of the high school, and just redecorating windows to make it more like lively. And then in terms of like other things, I recently learned that Ella Taplin is 19th in the nation for wrestling in her weight class. So that's really cool. And then, I mean, some people are kind of sad that break is over, but I mean, that was kind of expected. And then another thing is that I know like all the seniors that I know, and especially like English teachers, are really glad that senior projects we're not doing it this year. And I think around this time, people would be kind of stressed about that. So I know that people are pretty happy that we're not doing that this year. And that's what I have for today.
Thank you, Sonia. Any questions for Sonia? Okay, I think Dave, you're up.
Absolutely. Hope everyone had a great spring break. Spring break is always the start of the sprint towards June, and this year it looks even more like a sprint. There's just a lot going on in the district, so it should be really busy. The good news for us is COVID continues, things are continuing to improve. We currently have 2 staff members and 3 students who are sick with COVID. We did just about 3 weeks going into spring break, we had 0 staff sick. I met with cases increasing in Europe. We met with Washington County today to kind of talk through that. They're not expecting case rates to rise significantly, even with some of the things going on in Europe. They also said that even if case rates do increase, they're not actually expecting this to impact hospitals or care, which means that we're not going to really have to change what we're doing, even with an increase in case rates. So that to me just speaks to the fact we're still heading towards more normal school days, is what it looks like right now. As a matter of fact, we have been meeting for about 1.5 years every week with Washington County Health. We're now rolling that back to a monthly meeting, which again just speaks to kind of some movement towards normal. So that's the good news that we kind of have around COVID. Another piece of good news, the plant sale is going to happen this year fully. Last year, they mostly just did the big baskets because they just didn't have the students there to help with the watering and the planting and all of those things. But this year, it looks like we're going to have a full plant sale. It's going to happen April 28th and 30th through the 30th, and then through the May 5th through the 7th. So I know some of our folks were walking by the greenhouses, and it's just great to see kind of our CTE programs running at full speed right now. So I know I'll mark the date because I like to go get a bunch of plants from there. So just wanted to make sure that everybody knew about that. Last thing, staff recognition. We'll again be out in buildings serving coffee and treats to our staff as they arrive the week of April 11th through the 15th. For our board members, we'll send out another email to you tomorrow to kind of get yourself on it. And it'd be great if we could have you just jump in with a couple of the different schools. It's really a fun time to, and it's been a while since we've been able to do some of that. Right before the break, I will say that we hosted a little get together at the district office and little baked potato bar kind of lunch thing. And it just struck me in the middle of it that it's been like 2 years since we actually had everybody together kind of, and everybody's just talking and relaxing, and it was good to see again. So again, this will be one more thing that maybe brings us back towards normal. And with that, I'm going to leave the rest of my comments to my presentation a little bit later tonight. So I'm going to hand it back to you, Kate.
Okay, thank you. All right, unscheduled public appearances. I checked with Kathy and we have no participants through Zoom or emails. So I'm going to move on to the consent agenda. The consent agenda is made up of routine, non-controversial items to be voted on under one motion. Are there any items within the consent items a board member or the superintendent wishes to discuss separately? Okay, I will do a roll call. Brad?
I'll make a motion first, Kate, that we approve the consent agenda as presented.
And I second.
Perfect. Okay, all right, thank you, guys. Discussion. No discussion. I guess I want to just move this meeting on. Okay, Brad?
Yes.
Val?
Yes.
And I'm a yes also. The first presentation tonight is the English Language Development Coaches Update. And go ahead.
Hey, Kate, did we forget Sonia?
Oh, Sonia. Yes, we did. Sonia?
Yes.
Okay, I don't have her on the sheet that I'm following, so I apologize, Sonia. Okay, the agenda has been approved, and we will move on to the next agenda item, which is the presentation of the English Language Development Coaches Update. So who is going to begin that? Laura, are you beginning that or is Oswald?
It's actually all of us, but I will begin. Good evening. Let
Thank
me
you.
see if I can share my screen. Please excuse my million tabs. You're probably already used to me having a bunch of them. So first, I really would like to, take advantage of this opportunity to thank the board for giving us, this opportunity to come and share information about our ELD program and at the same time celebrate the work that our teachers are doing with some of the most vulnerable population of students. And that is the ELD population of students. So I'm here presenting with a team and side by side, we have 2 of our 3 coaches. The first one is Laura Manning. She's gonna be speaking in a few minutes. She's in charge of supporting teachers at levels pre-K through 4th grade. We also have Joelle Rickard. She's supporting teachers grades 5th through 8th. And we also have Carrie Bloomquist, who is not here today, but she's a half-time coach at the high school, specifically supporting teachers in the area of CM. That's not the whole team. We also have 8 EL facilitators who are in the buildings also providing support. 4 of them are full-time EL facilitators, and the rest of them are, not only facilitators, but they are also EL teachers. That, can be also supported by the effort of more than 16 ELD teachers and 9 instructional assistants who are there day by day, working with our students. So that's our team. Here there are some statistics. I'm not gonna really go through it a lot. I just want you to know that they are there. We have, about 1,017 ELD students who represent about 17% of the population. So when we began this work with our EL coaches, we set 3 important goals. The first one was to accelerate, the rate in which we were teaching or the students were developing, their English skills. That English language development of EL students, that rate needed to increase. And we are gonna be following very closely the time study of EL coaches so that we get closer and closer to a 70% focus on teacher support and coaching, which is our hope. Metrics for that are gonna be checking level changes, exit rates, and the way in which EL students remain on track for English language proficiency. Goal number 2 is moving from teaching explicit ELD instruction into teaching ELD within content areas. That's on a specific focus that we, have been extremely focused this year, and we will continue to be focused for the remaining, for the foreseeable future. And obviously the metrics for that, we'll be looking at the way EL students perform in the Smartest Balance assessment, in the area of math, reading, and also the graduation rate. The third goal that is also extremely important for us is we are in this literacy adoption year. And it is extremely important that that adoption also works for our EL students. So we need to have our coaches providing expertise, to successfully select culturally and linguistically appropriate material, and also provide the necessary scaffold and to support Spanish literacy as this adoption takes place. So right here, you can tell a graph that talks about how our EL coaches have spent their time, what have been the main areas of focus for them. There are 8 important areas, and I think that what is really significant here for us to consider, just one second. You know, the majority of these areas are really strongly related to teacher support. You know, whether we talk about actually coaching or being, you know, in the area of teacher instructional support, collaboration of planning, the equity work, professional development, the adoption component. But this area right here, assessment and substitute, that represents 37% of the work that our coaches have been doing this year. And that is something that we necessarily need to revisit in the future, because that right here, that is LPAT testing that no one else you know, could do. And then our coaches had to pick up. And right here, you know, that's all the time that our coaches had to spend in the classroom teaching over subjects and covering for the need imposed by the pandemic. So at this moment, I'm going to turn it over to our coaches for them to explain a couple of things. Go ahead, my team.
Okay, hello. I think you all know me, but anyway, I'm Laura Mannon, and I am the pre-K through 4th grade instructional coach this year, new position. And so I'm working in the 6 elementary buildings. And this graph shows kind of where my time has been spent. And you'll see the large chunk there that is the district office, which is, you know, certainly not the goal for that to be as large of a chunk, but that has been this year a lot of working with the online academy, which presented issues that we didn't expect, equity work, as some of the literacy adoption work, and then as a new team of coaches, kind of getting ourselves off the ground. The other large slices that you'll see there are Joseph Gale, Echo Shaw, and Fern Hill, and those are buildings that all had new ELD facilitators this year. So a lot of my time has been spent there really trying to mentor those people. And the goal, you know, as we move forward is to see that move towards more of a, you know, 70% of the time out in the buildings and in those 6 buildings. And I'll turn it over to Joelle.
Thank you, Laura. It's great to be here tonight. I'm Joelle Rickard, and I am the ELD instructional coach for grades 5 through 8. 42% of my time was spent at NAMS due to ELPA testing. I'm intentional about spending more time at NAMS than Tom McCall for staff meetings and PDs, as I'm new to the building and want to become familiar with the staff and school culture. And I discovered that I really love middle school. My time at the DO is representative of district-wide work, such as planning for ELD facilitator meetings and PD, online academy ELPA testing, equity work, and the literacy adoption. Time spent at Tom McCall is primarily focused on meeting with teachers, visiting classrooms, and training the new ELD facilitator. And similar to Laura, my goal is to have 70% of my time be in the buildings, focusing on coaching and offering instructional support to teachers. So now Osvaldo will share our survey results.
Yeah, when we went out there, we tried to gather some opinions from our teachers. So we got, opinions from EL teachers, content area teachers, and EL facilitators in our schools. And they gave us not only qualitative, but also quantitative data. So the 3 main, learning ideas that we got from those surveys were that 100% of the participants would recommend that a colleague to work with an instructional coach. So that was significant. 95% of them believe that the coaching cycle or instructional support had a positive impact on students. And 91% of them believe that the coaching cycle or instructional support had a positive impact on their teaching practice. I think that those three right there were significant. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Laura to talk about some of the qualitative comments.
Excellent. So we had a chance to ask people to give some of their feedback on, what their experience had been working with either Joelle or myself. And so we'll just read a couple of these comments to you. And of course you have it and can read it yourself, but it's so wonderful to have someone in the building whose sole job is to support teachers, especially this year when nothing feels like it did before the pandemic.
Another teacher said, this coach has supported culturally responsive teaching. In turn, an environment of trust where the kids are taught has been nurtured. The kids have responded positively by speaking more in class and sharing more about themselves.
After every session, my coach sends an email with follow-up questions. Every single time, these questions have pushed me to change something about how I will be teaching my next lesson. Minor changes like how to introduce a lesson or how to organize a unit, or considering how a lesson looks and feels to a student have all impacted my teaching practice. Working with her, I am feeling more successful as a teacher than I have in the past 2 years since the pandemic began.
And lastly, specifically, student impact was felt with the kinder team coming together to work with the instructional coach. Students were engaged in the learning and demonstrated significant depth of knowledge, which is impressive at the kinder level.
So the big question here is, this is what everybody's saying, but how are we going to actually measure that we are being successful in this work? And we're going to be looking at, some baseline data points to determine that impact. We're going to be looking at ELPA 21 data. We're going to be looking at, Smarter Balance Assessment data in math and reading. And we are going to be looking at graduation data specifically for EL students. And Laura is going to be talking a little bit about what happens with some of those, how to interpret a little bit some of that data.
So our big test that we're right in the middle of right now for our English learners is the ELPA 21. And the ELPA 21 evaluates students in 4 different areas. So it evaluates them in their reading, writing, listening, and speaking ability in English. And in each of those domains, it rates them on a scale of 1 to 5. And then the students, those scores are combined by the state, and they develop or determine what the student's proficiency level is. And so proficiency level wise, the state has 3 proficiency levels. So we go from 5 down to 3. And those levels are emerging, progressing, and proficient. So emerging is usually our students who are really, really beginning in their English ability. Progressing is this huge category that includes students who are really still learning English, and then students who are fairly advanced. And then proficient, once a student hits that proficient mark, that's when they exit the ELD program. And at this point with the state, that's the only way to exit the designation of English language learner, is by getting that proficient status. And in order to get that proficient status, a student has to score a 4 or a 5 in each of those 4 domains that I was talking about. So currently, 93% of our English learners have already taken the ELPA for this year. So we're almost done with that chunk of testing. And by mid-May, we should have our results and then be able to look at what are, how we've done as far as exit rates and change of proficiency level rates.
Hey, Laura, this is Brad.
Yeah.
I just said, when you say that, what are we comparing it to? Are we comparing the data that we're gathering this year to pre-COVID data, or are we comparing it? Go ahead.
And that's what's coming.
And that is exactly what Osvaldo's going to talk about. But yes, we are going to compare it to pre-COVID data.
Okay.
There you go. We were thinking about that exactly, Brad. Thank you for the question. So this is the historic ELPA level projections and data. And you can see that cylinder right there. that represent the COVID years. And obviously that data is really unreliable. I mean, not in those years, we cannot even talk about high percentage of completion. In the year 2018 and 2019 was the last year in which with Fidelity, we tested 100% of our students. So we're trying to use that as our base data. And as Laura described, you know, the blue color right there, that's that emerging category. The big block in red is the progressing. And what we're trying to do, I mean, obviously the yellow, those are the kids that become proficient and automatically exit our program. So what we are doing right now is using that information as our base data. And for this year, we are hoping that we are aligning our goals to our district SIP goals, which is the increase of 1%, growth between this year and the current year, and a 3% growth for the following year. And obviously, a 1% growth and a 3% growth does not look as significant. But when we take a look at that as counting numbers of students, it actually becomes a more significant number, because now we're talking about going from 95 students to 108, which is a 13 number of students exiting the program. And when you go from 95 to 128, we're talking about 33 students exiting the program. So that's actually our goal, which is really significant. Similarly, for the on-track ELL data, what on-track means is that, you know, if a student comes into our system and scores as a beginner, an ELL student or an EL student has, up to 7 years to be able to exit the program. And if they do it in that time frame, then they are considered on track. And that's what we want. We don't want the student to take longer than that time. If the student is a special needs student, then another year is allowed. So we need to exit that student within 8 years. So if we go to the data in 2018, 57% of our EL students were on track. We are trying to apply the same measure, increase by 1% and then by 2%. And that would be the measure of whether we are making progress in our goals. You know, another, like we said earlier, another important metric here is the graduation numbers. And as you can take a look here in this graph, we are doing extremely well currently. I mean, if we take a look at ELL and migrant, and by the way, I'm not suggesting these two groups are the same, but there are a significant number of migrant students who are also ELL. But you can see how these two subgroups are the only two subgroups who actually outperformed the year prior. What you see in blue right there, that's a 71% of EL seniors who graduated last year in comparison to 49 who graduated the year prior. And similarly for the migrant students, there is that 8% differential. So there is a lot to be said right there about the work that is being done district-wide to prepare those students to make it all the way to the high school, and also the sensational work that the counselors are doing with attendance, that the teachers are doing at the high school in order to make sure that those students stay in the programs, remain on track, and actually fulfill their graduation requirements. So kudos to everybody, but specifically the high school is doing a fantastic job. So what are we gonna do? I mean, what is our plan? I mean, there are a number of key issues that we consider important, but we narrow it down to these 5 key elements. Number one, we need to rewrite our local EL plan because we gotta make sure that those goals that are being explicit designed per grade level, and by building those need to be redesigned. we also need to make sure that we develop common formative assessment for ELD as well, to be able to strengthen, the explicit instruction that needs to be happening, not only for ELD, but also as we provide the sheltered instruction necessary within core content areas. Number 4.
Osvaldo?
Yeah, go ahead.
Question. Isn't there a plan already in place, an ELD plan already in place?
Yes, great question. But that law plan expires every so many years. And the one that we have is not current. And the goals that are embedded in that plan are not congruent with the goals that we have goals right now that are more aggressive and that are a little bit more aligned with the SIA goals and with the SIP goals that we have as a district. So we have to review the ones that are in the plan.
So who's writing the plan?
I am in charge of that with my team.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. And then obviously, the support and implementation of the new literacy curriculum. We already talked about that a little bit. And then finalizing, the importance of providing a professional development that is relevant, that is going to make a difference, especially in the areas of GLAD, CM, that means constructive meaning, and sheltered instruction, and the equity work that is so necessary and that has to come with it. And with that, I hope we fulfill this within the 15 minutes allowed. And we are going to open the floor for any questions you may have. Thank you for allowing us the opportunity.
Thank you, all three of you. That was very informative. I appreciated that. I do have a question. So when you're providing coaching for the teachers, are you doing like online instruction plus in the classroom instruction? So like, let's say all the kindergartners, teachers, are you providing strategies where they can all see it online, like, and then going into the classroom? Or are you just going into the classroom?
Yeah, it's been at this point in the classroom and then doing lots of meeting with teachers as well. So like with kindergarten, meeting with the kindergarten team at a school and, what are your goals? What are you working on? And helping with some of the planning, helping with some of, the strategies that then might be used in the classroom. And then, as in some cases, the teachers then want us to come in and kind of give feedback, what did you see? What could we tweak? What are, and some of those kinds of things.
Yeah, one of the thoughts I have, I belong to a quilting group online, and you can go back for the lesson on whatever you were working on. So, are you guys thinking of doing something like that so that they have the instruction, but then they can go back and review it? So it's easy for them to say, did I hit the mark or not? Or, I would like a little bit more information. I forgot whatever part of what she was talking about. Are you going to do that in the future?
I think that's a great idea, Kate. And one of the things we started actually at the start of the pandemic, when Leonard Terrible was in charge of the program, he requested that some of us put together a bank of videos on different strategies. And so I know that Joelle and Melissa Tim and I, did a bunch of different strategy videos, like explaining, this is how you do a cognitive content dictionary for GLAD, or this is how whatever that teachers then could have access to. And I think that would be something that we should look at. How do we make that bank really available for people?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I know your time is limited, and especially when I see in the pie how much you had to fill in for substitutes. It was just a really challenging year. But I know myself that when I hear something, I like to go back and review it a couple times. And I think, especially our beginning teachers, I think that would be, if you had the time and the money to do it, I think that might be a good avenue to go down.
Yeah, Kate, you cannot be further from the truth. I mean, that's essential what you're saying. As a matter of fact, at the conclusion of our last PD, because we still managed to provide some professional development for our ELD staff. Some of our staff, they are so great that they actually signed up to do exactly that work. And we have already 5 or 6 staff members, especially those who have been in the trenches for a long time with a lot of experience and expertise, willing to jump in and provide that kind of input. So yes, the answer is you are right on, and we are already thinking about doing something like that.
That's good. How many people are part of your underneath you? You know, how many staff are you working doing the ELL and the instructional piece under you as well?
I have, like I said, 3 English, EL coaches, and I have 8 ELD facilitators, and then we have about 16 ELD teachers, but those are managed by the principals in the buildings. They are still instructing ELD, but they are staff members in their buildings. And we have about 9 instructional assistants who are also specifically working with the ELD population. So that's our team. That doesn't mean that, like, for instance, at Cornelius Elementary, everybody teaches ELD, you know? So
Right.
it depends on the building. But as far as ELD staff, we can say we have about 16 ELD teachers.
And what else do you guys need?
We need your trust. We need your support, because we are going to make it happen. We just need you to keep doing what you're doing.
Well, we know you guys are very good at what you're doing, so we really appreciate what you're doing. So thank you. Are there any other questions for?
I just have a comment, Kate. I guess just looking at this pie for Laura and Joelle, I guess what I'm hearing is that your hope is to get this piece that says district office a lot smaller and into the buildings and working with teachers. Not only the substitute piece also, because I guess that's, if I was looking at this, I would hope that there would be more time in the building as opposed to in the district office. So yeah, it's just a comment.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. This was really informative, and thank you for taking the extra time to put it together.
Thank you for listening to us and supporting our English learners.
Well, I like these presentations. I'm always learning something new. So, you know, I'm really glad that the superintendent, has put this together as part of our agenda. We will move on to the superintendent's goals, his update.
Perfect. Thank you. I'm going to share my screen here. Let me get organized here. One sec. Okay, there we go. So I'm going to move pretty quickly through this, but I wanted to spend a little bit. I'm not sure I titled this one the best, but once we get going on it, you'll understand where I'm headed with this. You know, in July and August, we worked on my goals and where we were headed this year. And this is kind of what we came up with: continue to manage the pandemic and position the district, enact systemic change for our historically marginalized students, and then determine the optimal configuration of grade levels. And as the year went on, we moved away from, really, it's been all about the pandemic. And from the start of the year, we had 41 staff members who were sick, and 300. This is from basically August through the end of December 31st, we had 344 students who were sick. From January to now, we've had 221 staff members who got COVID and were sick, and 795 students were sick. So this year while I had some goals at the beginning of this year, really it's been about the pandemic. And now one of the questions I think, I can't remember when I last presented on this, but Mark had kind of said, so what are you doing now? And where are you going? And how are we, what are we doing with these goals and what's happening? So I wanted to spend a little bit of time about some things that are emerging in the state and kind of how we need to move forward. So after 2 years in the pandemic, we just need to kind of plot our new pathway forward because of the things that were relevant 2 years ago. Now we need to re-examine some of those pieces. The other thing that's coming up for us is 2 years ago, we had, just as the pandemic came in, we approved our student investment account plan. And so we have to redo that plan because of it starts fresh again next year. Then the legislature passed in a budget note that they wanted to combine, because currently we have Measure 98, which is several millions of dollars for the high school. We have the SIA, which was $4.6 million for the district. We've got CTE and Perkins. We've got all these programs, and the legislature asked ODE to bring all those programs into alignment so that there's like one pathway or process that we're going to use. And so that's what ODE released on February 8th. And I'm going to move quickly through these slides and I'll send them to you later. So you don't need to read everything, but what I wanted you to know is there's 167 pages of instructions of how we're going to align high school success, Measure 98, student investment account, our continuous improvement, which is the plans that we put together through Title and our Perkins, the Everyday Matters, the early indicator. And so they've released this process of how we're going to go about doing all this. And it's a good thing, but it's pretty overwhelming too. In this, there's some common elements that all of these programs that they were asking us to do. One is to have an authentic engagement process, to use equity in making our decisions, focus on the students who have been historically marginalized. There needs to be a needs assessment done. So we've got to go out to our community and start looking at what they're saying our needs are. And then they want to create this continuous improvement. At the same time that they're doing this, we need to do this for a strategic plan. We need to get refocused and figure out how we're moving forward. As part of this plan, there's basically this spring, 2022, there's some pre-planning that we're beginning to work on. Next fall, I need to go out and engage the community. And the kind of engagement that we're talking about is the engagement I did my first year here, where we did 35 different community meetings. So it's a very large outreach. I think my plan right now would be to work all of this together because of going out to basically do our student investment account and then talk about Measure 98 and go out to the community, do this engagement. We might as well at the same time work on the strategic plan at the same time. We've got these people together. Let's bring it all together. They want us doing this. Basically, we're working, we're planning for kind of 2 years and then we're executing for 2 years. And so they see this whole cycle is repeating over and over again. The cycle has like 12 plans from the beginning, 12 steps from the beginning of kind of the pre-planning, which is where we're at right now, to next spring when we actually get a plan approved. Like I said, I'll send all this to you. I'm just want to, their planning requirements use an equity lens, have significant community engagement, engage our tribes, do a comprehensive needs assessment. There's just a whole bunch that goes into this. Community engagement, we've already kind of walked through that. The good news for this is in the end, instead of having 6 different systems, Measure 98 and this, there'll be one common spreadsheet where we show what we're spending money on and what it's going to of all these 6 plans. This is a good, I mean, this is a good development of this. So the next steps on this for me, and the reason I'm bringing it up is the question of what what are we going to be working on, and how are we going to get to a new strategic plan, and how are we going to start really getting focused around core instruction. For me, all of this works together, which is in the fall, I'm going to head out and we're going to do the engagement that we're going to have to do anyway, but we're going to bring into it the strategic planning part of this. Strategic plan, the integrated guidance. We've got bond development that we're still working on. So again, there's going to be some outreach that we're doing for that. We've got a brand new reading curriculum that's coming in. So again, there's going to be quite a bit of work around that. And then PLCs, we still have to, it's interesting, but the key to us improving student outcomes has to do with core instruction, which is how the core instruction is what every kid gets. Doesn't matter which grade level you're looking at, but what is the instruction that we're giving to every student? And what Oz was just talking about with the ELD, it's really the same thing, which is we have ELD teachers, but what we really need to improve is what is the core instruction happening in their regular classrooms, whether that's kindergarten or whether that's ninth grade. And so this whole PLC is really around how do we involve all of our coaches to improve core instruction. So where I was headed with this whole thing is kind of, you're looking at kind of the task list that I have out in front of me over the next probably 9 months. And what I'll be writing my goals around will be the creation of the strategic plan, the creation of this integrated guidance, which should work together. The bond development, the reading curriculum, how are we training folks, that kind of thing. So now I think if you want to, if there's some other things you want me to consider as I'm starting to, we're already starting the pre-planning for this. It's not going to wait. I mean, I need to kind of start going on this, but I would take feedback now on kind of, is this the right direction? That kind of thing.
Thank you, Dave. Any questions for Dave? Well, it looks good to me, Dave. It looks like a lot of work.
It's going to be a lot of work. We're still trying to figure out how to break it up to make it not quite, to make it a little more relevant, because of folks who are going to talk about the Perkins CTE stuff. Kindergarten parents aren't probably going to have as much. So we've got a lot of work to do to figure out kind of how to make all of this work, but that's the work that we're doing. I just wanted you all to kind of know what's out in front of us and what we're doing.
Well, it certainly makes sense when you see them trying to align it. So, you know, that will be good, but it's going to take a lot of time to do. So, yeah. Okay. Anything else, Dave, that you wanted to share?
No, but if you have, I went through a lot of stuff. I'll send this to you. If you have some thoughts or some other things that I should be thinking about, just provide me that feedback and we'll kind of go from there.
Okay. Thank you very much. We have 2 action items on the agenda tonight. The first one is the 2022-23 inter-district transfer process timeline and open slots. And Eileen, you're going to present that?
No, that's me.
Oh, that's you?
And so we presented kind of the last time the process, haven't gotten any questions from folks. The only thing that changed between the last time you saw it and this time was we adjusted a couple of the numbers for students who are currently at our schools who needed some slots. Other than that, they should be pretty similar to where you were at.
Okay. Hey, Dave, you want to take down the presentation?
Oh, yeah. Thank you. Yep.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for on the inter-district transfer process timeline? Val, Brad, are you okay with it?
I just want to make sure you also talk about the number of slots you let leave, because you typically have put 20. So I just want you to have that conversation before you approve the numbers to make sure that's where you still want to be.
Well, I'm fine with it. What about you, Brad?
Well, we've had 20 for the last how many years?
Yeah.
4.
So out of the 20, how many each year? I mean, how close have we come? What's the comparative sample look like?
Last year we received 50 applications to leave. So if they are not, so then we do an equitable lottery process. If they are not selected during the regular window, they can apply for a hardship, but it just makes a lot of extra work for families.
Which they typically do, correct?
Yes, and the thing is, the way the legislature has it set up, we can't ask why they want to leave in the first place.
Right.
Then I have to say, well, could you fill out this form? And, and the law allows for certain things that they have identified as a hardship.
Right.
So I just wanted you to have that conversation.
I personally, I think we leave it at 20, and then hopefully we won't hit. I mean, we're struggling with enrollment anyway. I don't know why we would increase that number, and so, but that would be my suggestion.
And Val, any thoughts?
Yeah, I was just wondering how many people total applied for a transfer into the district?
There was last year, I didn't look it all up, but probably about 20.
That's it.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, it wasn't your normal year either.
No, it wasn't your normal year.
Okay, if there's no more questions and you're both okay with 20, I'm going to make the motion. I move to approve the 2022-23 inter-district transfer process timeline and open slots as presented. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Discussion? Okay, we will take a vote. Brad?
Yes.
Val?
Yes.
I'm a yes also. And Sonia, is Sonia still with us? Did she drop off? Okay. All right.
She's still here.
Oh,
I said yes.
okay. Thank you, Sonia. The motion passes. The second action item for tonight is the 2022-2023 school calendar. This is a second reading. And Kevin, do you want to share some things about the adjustment on that calendar?
Yes, thank you, Chair Crandusty and board members. So tonight we are bringing, as you stated, the draft calendar for 2022, 2023. And yes, as we indicated in the board materials, there were two changes or edits that we had to make since the first reading. The first was we verified that the ODE statewide in-service date was actually the second Friday. And in our initial draft, we had it incorrectly on the first Friday. So we went ahead and made that change. And what that change did was ended up just shifting the rest of the PD and the conferences down 1 week. So that is the only change that happened in October. And that was just merely due to the statewide in-service date, getting that corrected on the calendar. And then the other change that we added to the calendar was in talking and the discussion that came up at the last board meeting about inclement weather days, that we did go back and do some research and looked at what we've had on previous calendars dealing with inclement weather days. And so we went ahead and added that language based on the board's discussion, that the sentence was added that says inclement weather days could be added back to the weeks of June 12th or June 19th. And that simply is just to put staff on notice that, if we do run into inclement weather days where we do have to close, that staff needs to be aware of that those could be added at the end of the school year. So those are the only two changes. And I'd be happy to entertain any other questions that you have.
Val or Brad, you okay?
I'm good.
Okay.
Want to make a motion, Val?
Sure, I move that we approve the 2022-23 calendar as presented.
Second.
All right. Discussion? Okay. Brad?
Yes.
Val?
Yes.
Sonia?
I'm actually not sure if I'm supposed to be voting, but
That's okay. You can go ahead and vote.
yes.
And I'm a yes also. See, I just make executive decisions. This is an inclusive club here. Okay, the next, we have future action items. You can review those. And then also at the end is the administrative rule JECBAAR. It's an admission of foreign exchange students. The changes to the admission of foreign exchange students administrative rule were included in the packet. So you can review those and, you know, if you have any thoughts or want any, bring up any questions at our next board meeting, okay? If there's no more questions and everybody's happy.
So
Yeah.
Kate, I would just, while we're here, we might as well just have a quick discussion. April 11th, we were kind of scheduled to come back in person, except for there's a film company that's doing some filming at the district office and some other places. They would like to rent our the Grove Room. They'll pay to rent the Grove Room, and they need it April 11th. So I just wanted to just have a quick conversation if we want to stay virtual for one more session and then come back on like the second board meeting in April, and then we can rent out the Grove Room. They're renting our space other days, so it doesn't make any, I mean, to say no kind of hurts. I mean, they're renting us in different ways, so, but I would leave it up to you. I'll let them know whatever we decide.
Yeah. Well, with me is I would really prefer to do it to meet the second meeting, whenever that is, in April, because I really wanted to wait 2 weeks after spring break. You know, unfortunately, I have to worry about my health. So I would prefer to do it the second meeting in April. Brad and Val, your thoughts?
If you guys can make some money and it'll help you out, then I'm fine with us being virtual.
Good. I'm good with it.
Okay, then we'll head for that then.
Okay, that sounds good. I hope you make a lot of money.
Yeah.
Okay, if there's no other issues or questions or whatever, I'm going to close the meeting out at 7:40 p.m. And have a good night, everybody.
Good night.